Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar, Managing Risk During a Product Crisis. My name is Amy, and I'm a member of the marketing team at Perry Johnson Registrars Food Safety, Inc. I'll be facilitating today's webinar and offering technical support to our speakers. Today, we're happy to be welcoming back a speaker who joined us for a webinar last year, and that's Neshat Soofi of JIT Experts Hive, and I'll be introducing her to you all a little later on in the broadcast. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping notes. To ensure audio quality, all of our attendees are on mute. However, we do absolutely want to take any questions you might have. So to ask a question, just go ahead and type it into the questions tab of the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen and click send. We'll answer as many of these as we have time for at the end of the prepared slides. And you don't have to wait until the end of the broadcast to submit a question. So as you think of it, go ahead and type it in and send it off. Some of the most frequent questions we get have to do with whether there'll be slides available or a recording of the presentation. And the answer to both is yes, we will have the slides available from our website at pjrfsi.com. And a recording of today's webinar will be posted to our YouTube channel as well for anyone who attended to review, or maybe you want to share it with someone who wasn't able to attend the live broadcast. And this is just what it might look like on your screen with the questions tab. As I mentioned, you can open that right up. Type your question in and click send, and we will respond to as many as possible at the end of the show. But before we get started, I do have a quick polling question for you all just to see who's in the audience today. And that first question is your organization currently certified to a GFSI standard? Just choose whichever option suits you or your business best. All responses are anonymous during the broadcast, so vote however you feel most accurately describes your situation. And to those of you who are just joining us now a little bit late, welcome. Thank you all for coming. We'll get some more participation in this poll, and I'll go ahead and introduce our first speaker for today. All right, thank you all so much for everyone who participated in the poll. And it looks like the majority of those in attendance are already certified to a GFSI standard, which is always a great thing to see. All right, I'm going to go ahead now and introduce Paul Demarian, our first speaker. He's the Senior Vice President of Food Safety and Supply Chain here at PJRFSI. Paul joined us just about a year ago and has over 35 years of experience in the hospitality, service, and retail agri-food sectors. Paul is a board member of the OFPA, that's the Ontario Food Protection Association, as well as an advisory council member with the George Washington University School of Business for their digital marketing certificate program. Prior to joining PJRFSI, Paul worked for 16 years in the certification industry with clients in every sector, from food safety and supply chain to brand protection and quality. Paul has also worked for many years in management systems certification, and prior to that, Paul was a professional chef and a consultant for over 20 years. So without further ado, Paul, I'm going to hand things over to you, and you can take it away when you're ready.
Great, thanks very much, Amy. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to spend with us today. And we're very much excited about the opportunity to get back into our webinar schedule. We have about another 30 webinars planned between now and the end of May. So we hope you can join as many of those as possible. So just before we get started, again, I would also like to welcome a very special guest, Neshat Soofi, who I've known for many, many years. She is the CEO and founder of JIT Experts and is going to be giving us a great presentation today. I'm very much looking forward to it. So I just want to talk for a few minutes and just give you a bit of a background in terms of PJRFSI, who we are as a company. We're part of a family of companies actually that was founded in 1994, by Perry Johnson himself, and that was PJR, or Perry Johnson Registrars. That is the, think of the certification body from the non-food perspective, so quality, environmental, aerospace, automotive, medical. We had many other companies that were started over the last 30 years as well. So we had PJLA, which is our laboratory accreditation business. They accredit labs globally to ISO 17025, and that was founded in '99. We also have PJ&A, and that was founded in 2005 as a healthcare technology company. So think telemedicine and virtual scribing services. And then in 2012 is when PJR FSI was born, and that was as a result for the demand in the industry for food safety certification and quality, as well as brand protection. We're headquartered in Troy, Michigan. We've been around for a very long time, since the very beginning. And as I mentioned, part of a family of companies that offers registration, testing, and certification services. We have achieved several accreditations over the years as well. ANAB was our first back in 1995, UCAS and many others. Right now we have offices in about 20 countries around the world, auditors in about 60, and we have about 450 assessors globally. So over the last 9 years, we've worked in really every major sector in the industry. Today, we work with clients across all of them. So retailers, processors, exporters, importers, distribution companies as well. We work with all of our customers ultimately to protect their brand and help mitigate risk within their business by upholding various standards, which I'll talk to in a minute. We really believe that there is a big difference between customer focus and customer service. And I think a lot of companies today forget the importance of that. So I would certainly welcome the opportunity to demonstrate that to you. We have also quite an outstanding client attrition rate. In the industry, I've seen that the average is generally about 4 to 5%. Over the last 3 years, we've had a client attrition rate of about 1.7, 1.8, so that's pretty outstanding. And we consistently receive high ratings from our customers as well. So our services are broken down into several key areas. You know, in 2019, or excuse me, 2020 with COVID-19, the certification industry as a whole was deemed essential because it's really based on the results of tests and inspection, audits, and it helps give confidence to you and me as the customer that the organization's products and systems that we're using are being thoroughly evaluated against accepted national and international schemes by a competent third party. You know, still today, it's not business as usual. I think it's going to take some time before we get to that. But, you know, at the end of the day, our job is to provide high quality assessment services for you, while at the same time trying to reduce the impacts of COVID. And I think in today's market, this is even more critical because the environment is changing constantly. We're having to navigate different landscapes, seems like on a daily basis, and that can be a challenge for all different types of companies and the scopes and sizes. So as I mentioned, we have certification services or audit services, and we define them into third-party accredited. So these would be all of our GFSI standards or ISO standards. We do second-party unaccredited standards like GMP for good manufacturing practices or good distribution or HACCP. And we do a lot of work with customers in their own specific audit programs that could also be food safety or quality or brand protection or you know, transportation, or a number of different other types of audits that we can do, but are owned and developed by the customer themselves. So this next slide here is just a high-level overview of some of the standards that we currently support today. There's about 30 of them. We categorize them into 5 main areas. And the one that I didn't mention is that we're also recognized by several areas of government to perform many of those government audit inspections, like FSMA, FSVP for the Foreign Supplier Verification, as well as the VQIP program, which is Voluntary Qualified Importer Program. Now, if we take a look at, I mentioned earlier, standards and accreditations. This is just a snapshot of some of the relationships that we have and how we're recognized around the world with many scheme owners and accreditation bodies. And, you know, I believe that accreditation gives us all assurance that not only PJR FSI, but our family of companies operates under the rules of accreditation and scheme owners, and that helps to regulate us as a CB and maintain a high quality of work. It's a large investment that's made every year by our company as well as any CB, but it's well worth it in the end because it gives confidence, as I mentioned, to the consumer that they've partnered with a recognized and respected partner. And then just finally here, again, I just want to say thank you very much to wrap up my portion. You know, Neshat, again, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait for your presentation. And I really do hope that it's going to be not too much longer before we can see each other in person once again. So with that, thank you. And Amy, I'll pass it back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Paul. Let me go ahead and ask one more quick polling question before we introduce Neshat here. And that next polling question has to do with whether or not you have a formal recall or crisis team in place. So as I said before, if you missed the first polling question, all responses are anonymous. Just choose whichever suits you and your organization best out of the four. To those of you who arrived a little bit late, maybe missed the first part of the presentation, welcome. Thank you for coming. The recording of today's webinar will be posted on PGFSI's YouTube channel. So if you wanted to go back and review the first part of the presentation that you missed, you are more than welcome to do so once that's posted. All right, looks like we've got a great number of participating attendees here in the poll. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. It looks like a wide majority of folks on the call today do have a recall or crisis team in place, which is always great to see. But now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest today, and that's Neshat Soofi. Neshat is the president and founder of JIT Experts Hive, with a mission to connect innovation and knowledge and help CPG companies thrive by providing just-in-time hands-on expertise. Neshat comes with more than 25 years of experience in the CPG industry, with a diverse and successful career, having worked at startups to some of the top Fortune 500 companies, from Brandless to Target to Cargill, Smuckers, and Pillsbury. She comes with a proven track record of delivering end-to-end expertise in a broad range of consumer product categories, including food, beverage, supplements, CBD, PET, cosmetics, beauty, personal care, and many other personal household product categories. So without further ado, Neshat, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to present with us today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Amy and Paul, for your nice introduction and also for setting up this webinar. It's such a pleasure to be part of the series. Sorry, Amy, do I have the control of the slide?
Yes, you do have the keyboard now.
Okay, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be part of such a great series of webinars. Sorry again, Amy, it doesn't work. Okay, now it worked. So as Paul mentioned, I worked in, as Amy actually mentioned, I worked in CPG industries, primarily in food industry and other consumer product industry for many years. And I worked in different size companies at different parts of the supply chain. One thing that I learned is that regardless of the size, regardless of where you are in supply chain, and regardless of how sophisticated the company is, there's always surprises. And for those of us who work in risk management functions like quality and safety, those surprises are not always pleasant. So being prepared and have a good process in place and a response plan is a must. Okay. One of the first things I do when I start in any new company or work with a new client, if they don't have a crisis management or recall, that's the first thing that I start to develop. When I was working at Brandless, Brandless was a startup, so I was one of the first 5-6 people who joined the company to help stand up the business. And the first week, we were all sitting around a small table because we were a startup. And I remember our chief of merchant asked me, "What are you working on?" And I said, "I'm working on a crisis management." And she was like, "Oh my God, it seems you don't have that much confidence in our success." I said, "No, absolutely I have. But, you know, anything can happen day one, number one. And also developing a crisis management and a response plan gives me the framework to work on developing the preventative programs that's needed in order to make sure that response plan is never used in real life." So although we might start our work with making sure that a good recall crisis management process in place and hope never to use it, but we will be using most of our time in developing preventative plans and due diligences that are must-have to minimize and mitigate risk. And when we talk about risk by definition is the possibility of a loss or a hazard happening. The key word is possibility. So it means that if if you're part of a risk management function, you need to identify potential risks that are out there. And just as a side note, a lot of the quality and safety functions also take care of other areas of reputational management, such as like ethical sourcing, such as social media and communication and so on. So as you're developing your programs, you need to think about the broad spectrum of the type of risk that you're going to identify. You identify the risk, you assess the risk and prioritize them based on the severity and probability, and then start to develop preventative programs starting from the higher risk and then working yourself down the risk pool until you covered majority of the risks that can happen in your operation. And hopefully majority of us are spending most of our time on developing and monitoring and executing on those preventative programs and not dealing with crises and recalls. What happens is that by developing these programs, we may not be able to eliminate the risk because we don't have control over 100% of factors that are internal or external. But we make sure that even if a risk is realized and becomes a product issue or a product incident, the scope is much more limited and hopefully isolated, and it's not the result of a systematic failure. And by systematic failure, I mean when we have gaps in our system or gaps in our execution and due diligence. If an incident happened, the possibility that the scope is really large and that it ends up being a true crisis, or in case of a product, a recall situation, is much higher. So doing these preventative controls not only help minimize the possibility of the risk happening, but when the risk happens and becomes an incident, also helps us to minimize the scope of the incident and the damage that it can cause. We all know while we are in crisis, there are so many things. Like when something happens, there is a million things that we have to think about, million decisions to make, think about different actions that we need to take and stuff like that. And in the middle of all this, there are a lot of emotions that we need to control ourselves, as well as our internal and external partners, and some, customers, consumers, and so on. And we need to make sure that we have a well-thought plan, prioritization plan, as part of our response plan to help us stick to the plan to do the first things first. Otherwise, we're going to end up doing things that we are doing because of the loudest voice or the strongest emotions are forcing us to make decisions. That's not the right time. So in developing a response plan, a crisis plan, a recall plan, it's not only important to know what are all the things that needs to be done, but the sequence and order is important too. So what's the first thing first? The first thing is when you're dealing with a product health and safety, consumer health and safety issue, is to minimize the risk to consumer. So that means making a product decision. So before doing anything else, you need to make your initial product decision. And the good news is that you can take those actions quick. Bad news is that you may not have all the information that you need to make sure that this decision is the best decision to make or the final decision to make. But that's what we call initial product decision. Based on the limited number of amount of information that you have to do a very quick risk assessment and say, do I need to put the product on hold? Do I need to stop further sale of this product? So depending on whether you are in supply chain, if you're in manufacturing, stopping the production, putting the inventory that's in your control on hold, thinking about, do you need to let the salespeople know that no more shipments are going to happen, so they know that the sale is on hold? If you're in retail, do you need to lock the product at the cash register so no more purchase can be made, and so on? So that's the very first decision, and it's important to make the right decision. Now, we in product safety, we are very, very cautious people, and we're always going for the most cautious route, which is great because that is less risky. But we cannot just keep it in mind that you cannot every time there is a potential food issue or product issue that you put everything on hold, stop sale, and so on, because then you will lose your credibility too. So having the right amount of information is important, and that's part of the process that you put in place, that those sources that are in contact with external partners and customers and are the first source of notification, what kind of information they need to gather and to escalate to you so you can make this initial decision in a fast but in a logical and practical manner. Second is, as soon as that first decision is made, so you've minimized more damage to more customers and so on, you need to think about communication. And communication is not only about making sure that everybody is aware internally and they're doing what they're supposed to do, but it's about a big part of it is brand and reputation management, especially when it comes to external communication, when you need to notify a customer, when you need to notify, your consumer base or whatever, but also internally. So start thinking about it and think about, considering the scope of the issue, what kind of communications you need to do, internal, external. If it's external, then who needs to be part of this communication protocol development? Definitely, if you're in larger companies, there are all sorts of PR, communication, legal groups that need to sign off on anything that goes out. But even in a small company, make sure that anything that you're putting together is being reviewed and approved by your leadership. Once the communication is underway, and communication is not a one-time deal, communication is happening throughout, and we're going to talk about it in more detail in next slides. That's the time to dig deeper and try to understand the root cause. Not so much to implement corrective action right away, more for doing a better risk assessment so you can make a final product decision. So if you need to talk, let's say there's a contract manufacturer involved or a supplier or your own facilities, you need to talk with production or with distribution, or you need to talk with suppliers. You might need to do testing. You might need to inspect the products, send them for more inspections or testing and so on. So that initial product precautionary hold action and then the communication give you time to do your root cause analysis and your more in-depth investigation of the incident. That would help you either make a final decision or make a recommendation for the final product disposition. And then last but not least, corrective actions and prevention plans. And we'll talk about those also in more detail, but again, it's very important. The most part of any incident, the only silver lining is the learning that we take away from any incident, and not doing corrective action and putting preventive controls to prevent the incident from happening again is going to be a big miss on our part. I cannot emphasize the importance of doing these steps in the right order. I have been myself in many situations where, before making any of those initial decisions and communications and stuff, we get so stuck in talking with our supplier or production, getting into corrective actions and preventative that, we miss those initial steps. And as we are talking about these things, more and more harm is happening to our consumers, to our brand, to our reputation. So it's important, critically important, but doing it in the right time is very important too. The last but not least is, so we said, despite all controls and preventions, incidents happen. So having a response plan and having readiness to take care and respond to a situation is a must. But again, do not do it in the middle of the crisis. Again, I have seen situations where as an incident happens, people are trying to put procedures in place or come up with formats and stuff like that. This is not the time to do that. Do manage the crisis and then develop it. And hopefully you already have, 80% of you already have, and then more 10 or 11% of you are in the process of putting it together. If you're not, you don't have it, or you're not planning to put one together, please do, and do it today. For those of you who have it, this is one SOP or process that, as I said, I usually develop first, and that's the process that I hope I never have to use. And regardless of, hopefully you have such great preventive control programs in place that you never have to use it, but you still need to keep it fresh. And by keep it fresh, we have, as part of our recall processes, mock recalls, traceability exercises and stuff like that. What I mean is that to do it end to end, not as often as you do traceability or mock recall, but do the end to end, including your communication, PR, leadership, and come up with a scenario where, communication, external communications have to be developed. Legal advice needs to be taken into consideration, and have all those partners involved in this practice. So this is going to stay fresh on everybody's mind. Okay. So talking about that, foundation of a robust crisis management, it starts with the heart of it is a crisis management team. So identifying the people who are going to be part of your crisis team and which departments and functions, depending on your operation, the type of product and services that you provide, those teams might be different. But having the team predefined, having the contact information, backup, everything is important. And then have a response plan, obviously. What this response plan do for you is that primarily defines the clear decision rights. And depending on the scope of the incidents, the decision right might be with different groups and levels in the organization or outside the organization. It also should clearly define the roles and responsibilities of functions that are involved that are going to have a role in executing the steps that's needed in the crisis. And what it does is help with the timeliness of the execution. It should also include communication protocols, meaning that what are the different levels of communication that happens at different steps of the process. I strongly recommend create simple templates for yourself. If the first communication is just to notify the crisis team, have that template ready. So it says what type of information need to be sent to them and what are the asks from different functions. If it's a communication to higher level or leadership in your organization to notify them of a situation, again, what type of information, and the scope of information that needs to be shared with them. And then move it along into external communication. If you need to send communication to your suppliers, your contract manufacturers, your customers. When it comes to external, meaning like consumer or market notification, some of those communications are at the company's discretion. If it's a market withdrawal, some of those are predefined, depending on the regulatory agency that has jurisdiction over your product or your industry. There are predefined templates with FDA, with USDA, CPSC, if you're in non-food and in consumer product section. And they have all these templates and what information, even to the size of the font and what the title should say. So go into those websites, pull those, and have them as an appendix in your communication plan. Having those things are important. Also, all the external contact information, your local or regional regulatory contacts that you might need to call in and pull into the discussion right away. These are not the things that you have time to do and try to search and find in the middle of a crisis. And then your root cause investigation and corrective action plan. Have checklists of questions to ask yourself as you are doing root cause, and then have documentation templates that you say, for example, what was the situation, what was the background, what assessments you've done, and what was your result, what was the result of your investigation, and then what kind of corrective action and preventive plans to use. Going back to the team, That's the most important element. It needs to be cross-functional. Depending on your operation, different who are going to be the functions. It depends on the your type of operation, but also size of your company. Make sure that you have backups for those people. So if somebody is on vacation or is not available, somebody else can do their job. Please keep in mind, not all the stakeholders are part of a crisis team. A lot of the time, the main decision makers are not part of the crisis team. When it comes time to make decisions about market withdrawals or communications outside your organization, there's a lot of time you need to pull leadership, your company leadership into the equation, and they are not part of a day-to-day crisis management team. So keep all of those in mind. Again, clear roles and responsibilities. Create a RACI chart for yourself. So as you're coming up with the list of people, use the RACI. Who is responsible for what? Who is accountable? Who is there as a consult or advisor? And who needs to be informed? And then have clear escalation process by type of incident. So if you have customer service departments or social media departments, and they're getting, depending again on the size of your company, when I was at Target, we were talking about thousands of contacts per day. So obviously not everything should be escalated. So we have to create real clear escalation process by type of contact or by type of incident. We called it urgent and non-urgent, and there was different requirements for the type of information to be gathered, as well as timeline of how quickly those situations needed to be escalated to teams like myself, our team like food safety or product safety teams and stuff like that. And also we had very, when it came to actions and decisions, we had very clear predefined protocols about what, who, when, how, and the communication among the team and how it should be done. When you put all this together, you're going to have a much faster and better decision making and execution. Okay, so now we're going to dig deeper into each one of these steps and so on. The first one, we talked about it, is the first priority is to make the initial product decision. Okay, so again, depending on your company, the type of industry you are in, the type of functions and processes you have in place, you may get notification of a potential product related issue from different sources. Primarily, a lot of it comes through the customer service departments, and or if you have separate social media departments and stuff like that, people who are in contact with the customer and consumer. Sometimes it's sales and marketing in companies that are B2B, business to business. Sometimes it's the contact is a regulatory agency that calls you guys. It might be, an NGO that, might call and talk about a potential product issue. And when we talked about the product issue, as I said, it's not just the product safety. It can be lots of ethical issues, like we've experienced in many companies that I worked, when we got notified of a potential, human or animal cruelty situation at a vendor. And we needed to take immediate steps to decide what to do with the product, how to respond to the situation, and so on. So depending on type of issue and the organization that you have, the notification comes from different places. Again, having an escalation process is very important. Get 80-20, get 80%, the departments that get 80% of the notifications trained first on when they get a contact that is product related, what information's to gather. Train them on the urgent and non-urgent issues. Train them on how to escalate and who to escalate it to in your organization. Then once it comes to you, you need to, in your head or on a piece of paper or in conjunction with 2 or 3 of your coworkers, sit down and make a quick decision about what you're going to do about a product. And it depends on the type of issue. It depends on the type of product and process. For example, when I was in retail, we would get allergen contact related If it was a food, it was a completely different risk level than when we were talking about, a topical product, like a personal care product, and somebody would call and say, I used it and I got itchy or I got rash, was very different than when somebody who was consuming food would call and say, oh, I ate this food and got allergic reactions. So having all those kind of factors in mind as you're making a decision is very important. How broad is the issue? Did it impact one lot, multiple lots? Have you heard about this type of issue before? Can it be isolated? Can it be broad? Is it health and safety impact? Can it cause, what kind of severe consequence it can have? Is it a brand and reputational thing? As I said, when I was at Target, we got notified that there was this viral video going on about one of our major ex-suppliers, videos of some of their allegedly facilities doing some bad things to animals, so animal cruelty issues at their facilities. And I can tell you, like in a matter of hours, we were bombarded through social media and our contact centers by calls from customers that were asking us our consumers asking us to pull the product, what were we doing, how we're going to handle this vendor, and so on. When you think about the potential broad reputational impact as well as the financial impact of any kind of decision, we knew that we were not the ones who make a decision on what to do with this product, and that it needed to be escalated right away to the leadership. But we had the right escalation process, we had the right forms, we knew what type of information we need to provide for our leadership so they can make the right decision. Anyway, once the initial investigation is done, the first question is there a potential for product safety and or major reputational issues? If yes, put the product on hold, on precautionary hold. If no, you can release the product, but keep monitoring and ask your customer service to keep an eye for similar situations if they come, to notify you immediately. But if yes, put it on hold. This will give you time to do the rest of the work that you need to do. Now, the precautionary hold might be just inventory on hold, whatever you have. It may not impact what you have in the market, and or it might be not only an inventory on hold, but a sales stop. And if you're a B2B company, it means that you might need to tell the customers who are waiting for shipments from you guys to come to let them know that that you're not going to ship the product. Or so how you're going to communicate that and not over communicate or create anxiety or panic when there is no need to, and buy yourself some time. So that takes us to having proper communication plans in place. Again, the communication plan, you need to think about it, that what is the scope of the impact of the product hold that you have. If it's only going to impact internal, like for example, you've stopped the production and whatever inventory you had in your warehouse has been put on hold and stuff like that, then you need to think about it. Should you communicate to manufacturing if you're not in manufacturing, obviously? And it can be your own facilities or contract ones. Do you need to communicate to suppliers if you're thinking or have that there is a possibility that the issue has happened because of some raw material and stuff like that? You need to talk to them. Warehouse, DC, fulfillment center, whatever you have, making sure that the products go on proper hold, both systematically as well as physically. Sales, marketing, and social. Do we need to let them know? I mean, when I was in e-commerce, one of the things we did when we wanted to stop sale was to show the product. We would turn the product as out of stock on our website. Well, make sure that your marketing, unbeknown to them, are not coming up with a marketing campaign that they're going to put this product as one of the, as a discount or as, gift with purchase and all that kind of stuff. The other important group is your inventory team. Now, again, if you're working in a retail, you need to make sure that either if you have access or your team have access, or that you have to work with inventory teams to lock the cash registers if you don't want to continue selling. Definitely don't forget your customer contact team. Your customer service team, they are the ones that need to know, and most of the time you have to provide them with an initial response to whoever has made the contact. And the response can be, thank you for letting us know, we're investigating, we're going to get back to you as soon as possible, we're going to keep you posted. But they need to make sure that that communication happens. Let your boss know. Don't forget that one. And then again, depending on the issue and the organizational structure that you have and functions, you might need to have different lists, different functions on this list. Then when it comes to external communication, you have all this, plus bring in your leadership. Don't let your leadership read about communication that has gone out through external channels. They need to know whatever is going out, whether it's to your customers or your consumers. Have the PR help you draft the communication. Now, in a case of a recall, obviously, a lot of those communications are predefined or pre-scripted by the regulatory agencies, but a lot of time, the decisions that we make are at the discretion of the company. And definitely ask help from your PR or your communication experts to word it in the proper way. It should be accurate, it should be truthful, but it shouldn't, but still you can massage it to minimize their reputational risk. Don't forget your legal counsel. And if it's a situation where you need regulatory agencies' input in the final decision, don't forget that. So your communication is not a one-time. It might be different details communicated throughout the process, but make sure that you keep the communication flow going, keep the internal and external stakeholders informed. It's very important to know what to say, what not to say. So not all internal communications are the same. The ones that goes to your leadership might be different than the ones that goes to, keeping the rest of the company informed and just saying that, hey guys, there's a crisis going on, be aware of it. It can be a general communication. Be aware of it. We're on top of it. We are handling it. If anybody comes and asks you any question, please direct them to so and so. So, but your communication to your crisis team or your leadership might have different content in them. And remember, the communication is important not only to make sure that we minimize safety risk, but also reputational and brand risk. So with that, we've got to the polling questions, and I will give it over to Amy.
Thank you, Neshat. We do have another polling question for you all to look at. And that one is, do you use a risk assessment tool or method to help you assess the severity and probability and to make decisions? There's 5 options here. As before, all responses are anonymous, so just choose whichever option best suits your stance in your organization. And to those of you who may have joined us a little bit late, that's not a problem. We will have the full recording with the voiceover and the slides available for download and review afterwards. We'll just get a little bit more participation in that poll and we'll move right along with the rest of Neshat's presentation. And I have seen a few questions come in, so if you have any thoughts as Neshat is presenting, please don't hesitate. You don't have to wait until the end of the presentation to submit a question. All right, thank you very much there. And this is how everyone voted. It looks like the majority uses paper files to collect data. All right, Neshat, back over to you.
Thank you, Amy. So just wrapping up the communication part, I remember when I was in a large company and we were going through some, it wasn't a product issue, but we were looking at some of the customer contact data, and there was a lot of feedback about the commercial that we had, and it was not positive feedback. I remember one of our marketing partners said, you know what, guys, there is no bad publicity. Every publicity is a good publicity. And I remember I told him, I said, like, there might be an exception. You don't want to be the recall that brings a recall or a product crisis or safety issue to bring attention to your brand. So there are some bad publicities, just in case some of your marketing partners think that even a recall or crisis is an opportunity to bring attention to your brand. Okay, so we've done our initial product decision. We've done our first round of communications, informed and engaged with the right stakeholders internally and externally. And those two hopefully has bought us some time to dig further into the situation and make a final decision or recommendation for a decision. So here is where we need to do a little bit more digging. Sometimes we need to do some testing, send products to be tested. We need to maybe have some products inspected. We need to take a look at the manufacturing records, suppliers records, warehouse records. And last but not least, one important piece of information is complaint trains or complaint data. Now, I don't want you guys to think or get into this game of numbers. And, you know, there's always like, everybody wants to have a black and white situation. I can't tell you how many times I've been pressed into providing numbers to say how many of a complaint is enough, needs to happen before we inform you guys or before you put a product on hold. And my answer, unfortunately, like, is it all depends. It all depends on the type of complaint. Sometimes one is too many. And that one is enough trigger or signal for you that you need to take action. Sometimes it's, you look at the trend. And when you're looking at the trend, you're looking at the trend within that product, like that item, how many of similar complaints you had. You might need to take a look at similar items, but not necessarily the same. You might need to take a look at all the items that's coming from that manufacturing facility or from that supplier. So there are so many ways to cut and dice data and to look at the trending. Don't get stuck into, you know, what is the minimum? There has to be numbers that tell us what to do. Numbers are one piece of data, but they don't tell you what to do, what not to do. For example, if you get a call, a contact that somebody has had a severe allergic reaction, you know, eating a food product, a food item that you guys have provided, the first action is take a look at that. Like, what kind of allergic reaction was it? Was it to dairy? Was it to fish? Was it to nuts? And then take a look at that product label. Immediately take a look at, first of all, that needs to be escalated to you guys immediately. That should be part of your urgent escalation process. And what you guys do is take a look at the label. If that allergen is not mentioned on the label, whether in the ingredient listing or in the may contain, you might have a broader issue at hand. So, and the severity of the consequence is so high that you don't want to take any chances. So that might be a place where you need to make that initial call to put the product on hold and then do more investigation. But then, as I said, then it will give you time to check the records to see what are the allergen programs at the production. Has there been, do they use rework? What is their label management process on production, label change management, and all that kind of stuff. And then you can make a final decision to say, was it an isolated? Was it abroad? And if it was isolated, maybe it was not because of your product, because you have full confidence that there are the controls and programs in place are there to prevent potential allergen contamination or cross-contamination. So once you do your more deep digging and investigation and use whether you use paper forms, whether you use a system, risk assessment system, the two things that you need to think about is severity and probability. And I'll jump into that slide first, and then next slide first, and then come back to this one. Okay. You don't need a system if you don't have one to do this. What I found very helpful when I'm working with a lot of pieces of data and papers and stuff like that is just to have one visual way of summarizing everything that's going on around me and try to put that incident visually in a place where it gives me some directional risk assessment. So you can use something as simple as this. Have this chart and then say, okay, based on the information that I have, thinking about severity. Is it no impact? Is it low impact? Is it medium impact, major, or extensive? Give you an example. The allergen situation that I talked to you about. It's the severity is extensive. If somebody gets allergic reaction because of a potential allergen issue in your product, the results can be, sometimes fatal. So the severity is pretty extensive. Now, once you look at your data that you've gathered from your label, first of all, if you see that, oh, your label already has this allergen on it, whether it's an ingredient or the may contain, then you say, the probability that somebody else is not going to use that or read the label, somebody who has severe allergies to something, that eats the product without reading the label is highly unlikely. And so it sort of brings your risk to a much lower level. Versus if you take a look at that and label, and then you see that, oh my God, we don't even have that ingredient on our label in any way and shape. And based on what you've seen, there is a potential for cross-contamination. Maybe you don't test everything, the rework is not managed or something like that. And the chances are very likely, all of a sudden, your risk level goes right on the top right corner. And the actions that you take are very different. If this is the situation, the second scenario, most probably you not only have to put the product on hold, but be prepared for an external market action, potentially a recall one. If it's, at the other hand, at the left corner of this spectrum, well, you might need to put the product on hold until you do a few checks, or even not to put the product on hold because you have that allergen on your label, and you might want to communicate with the customer service and ask if the customer has read the label and knew that this product has this allergen in them, and if they've taken it, we have done everything we could. There's nothing more we can do to stop those kind of incidents. So depending on that, it really helps you put it in a spectrum. Again, it's not always a product safety issue. Sometimes it's a reputational issue. And you do the same regardless of that. You can use the same type of thought process to come up with like, okay, is it possible that happened? In that case, I might need to put product on hold. Potentially there won't be any external action. For example, I was talking to you about that, animal cruelty and egg supplier situation. That was, the impact to the reputation was severe, just based on the number of calls that we got in such a short period of time. And we didn't know whether that video was, right or wrong, or whatever it was said in that video was correct or not. But just taking that extensive impact and then putting it through like, yeah, it's possible that this has happened, made us make a decision about taking market actions. And so it really impacts your decision. Sometimes it's not even, sometimes it's a, human or ethical sourcing situation that comes up. Something comes up about your supplier or supply chain that might make you take different decisions. And again, keep in mind, the risk is not always just product safety. And in many companies that I worked, when I was in charge of like food safety or product safety teams, we had the integrity and ethical sourcing under us too. So we were dealing with different kind of situations. So going back to, oops, oh, where did I go? Sorry, guys. Okay, here we go. So you use some sort of risk assessment, methodology, tool, visual to help you decide, do we need to take further product actions? And those can be, yep, initially we put it on hold, we did more investigation, we found out that the possibility or severity is low enough that we can release the product. All you need to do internal communication. And I've put here D under some of these actions to just to give you an idea. Again, this D depends on the scope of your organization, how small or big it is, and so on. But sometimes it can be your department that can make that decision, like about releasing a product. Sometimes it's the product safety, quality, and regulatory with the manufacturing. Sometimes it's with leadership, and sometimes it's an external. So I have put color codes. So as it becomes more severe action, it turns like into more red. So if you decide that internally, whatever inventory you have in hand, either you have to destroy it or you can fix it, send it for a reinspection, rework, or something like that, then that's a lesser of an impact on reputation and brand versus if it goes into a market withdrawal. Again, it's not a product recall, it's a market withdrawal, but it has impact on reputation. So you need to be a little bit more, work with PR, legal, leadership, and all that to make that decision and communication, and then product recall. So once you have that, then last but not least, you need to identify root causes, work with all the parties involved to implement corrective action, establish preventive controls and measures, make sure that the management of that facility or that operation has commitment and it's not just lip service. Then once you implement those, you check to make sure that they have been effective. Those controls that you guys have put in place has been effective. Basically, plan, do, check, act. And it's not just for that incident. The only silver lining when you're in a crisis is that take a step back after it's done and jot down your learnings. What worked, what didn't. Do a post-mortem and take that opportunity to improve your crisis management and response plan. Again, some final thoughts. Incidents happen, systematic failures shouldn't. Check the adequacy of your programs when you're not in crisis. Keep the process fresh, find gaps and fix it. Have forms, contact info, links to regulatory handy and part of your SOP. When you're in crisis, stay calm, don't become defensive, don't get into excuse finding, finger pointing, blaming game. That all happens. I've been there, done that myself. And don't underestimate the importance of checklists. Those checklists brings you back, whether it's like what to do or questions to ask as you are deciding your risk. Those are very helpful. Do the first things first, stop further consumer health and safety risk, then minimize brand and reputational damage through proper communication, and then do your root cause and corrective actions after all. Don't do it alone. Use your internal team and external partners and advisors, and bring in experts when needed. Sometimes you have a legal counsel, sometimes you have to bring a legal counsel that is expert or in certain areas. Communication throughout the crisis, keep the emotions out, be very factual, concise, and timely. There are a lot of tools to use like SBARC and other communication tools. Use them. A lot of us with technical background, science background, we get into too much detail. So again, keep it factual, concise, and timely, and then make sure that you do it right people, right time, right message. So I'll end up with a simple rule that makes it all easy to remember. It's called Rule 1, 2, 3, consumer, communication, corrective action. So the 3 C's, consumer, communication, and corrective action. With that, I will, this is my contact information if you need to talk more about any of these. And then I want to thank Amy and Paul for setting up this webinar and providing this opportunity, and it was such a pleasure. Thank you.
It was a pleasure having you, Neshat. Thank you so much for that really comprehensive and detailed presentation. It was great. Just before we get into the Q&A, I know we're running a little short on time, so please bear with me if you can. We do have some upcoming webinars. We have plenty of them scheduled through June. So for a full list, please go to our website at pagerfsi.com/webinars. All of our webinars are free to join, and we hope to see everyone there. So let me go ahead and open up the questions panel. I know I saw a couple coming in, so if you have any more, please send them in, and we'll get to as many as we can. All right, we've got a question here for you, Neshat, from Mauricio. And that question is, would trade or science associations, chambers, etc., be considered another communication node?
Very good question, actually. Yes, it depends on the issue. When it's a very internal product issue, like a product issue that has is tied to your process or your ingredients and stuff like that, most probably not. But if it's a more broader product issue, like for example, all of a sudden there is Dr. Oz comes up with something, a program that talks about, you know, all apple juices are filled with cyanide. Well, that's not something that you as an individual company should be handling. It should be done more in the context of bringing all those companies that get impacted, so you guys have a unified approach and communication. And that's where the trade associations, you know, like GMA or specific trade associations can be a good partner.
Excellent. All right, this question is from Allison. Allison is wondering if there are any common blind spots that you've come across with companies managing risk during product crises.
I think that's something that I have always to check myself, and it's just that because, you know, when a crisis is happening, emotions are very high. And when I'm not a physician or a psychologist, but I know when the adrenaline rush comes, the logic goes away. And so just staying calm and using your checklist to make sure that you're not responding to the loudest voice or the strongest emotion, and you are you know, taking things in the right order. And then secondly is that don't let yourself be the scapegoat. If you've done your job properly, communicate internally to your organization that you guys are risk managers, not risk eliminators. And the third one is keep it fresh.
Perfect. All right, let's see. And I do apologize if I mispronounce any names in this. We have a question, or rather a request from Iman. They're wondering if you could give another example of a case to apply the quick decision making for recalling a product. So maybe an example that you've seen in the past.
Well, there's no quick decision about making a recall other than, you know, the scope of the context. Like all of a sudden you get 10 complaints about one product making somebody ill, that you can potentially have to make a recall decision right away. First of all, I don't know if you're Iman, you're in food or other consumer product categories, but in recall decisions, the regulatory agency needs to be involved. So the most important thing is that if you feel it's a potential recall situation, gather all the information that's needed, and those information needed are listed on FDA's website, CPSC, USDA's websites, and then have it ready, and then have your contact with your regulatory agency, talk to them, after obviously talking internally, talk to them to help you assess whether it's a recall or not.
All right, excellent. We've got another question here from Mauricio. That question is there a degree in crisis management for the food industry out there?
I don't know. I have, it's been a while since I've done my food science degree, and I'm not sure. That's a great question, whether there are specific universities or colleges that has, you know, part of their curriculum. I don't believe that there is a specific degree in crisis management. There might be courses, but I'm sorry, Mauricio, I don't know that.
Amy, so I'm from near Kitchener-Waterloo, about an hour west of Toronto. We have a couple of universities here. One is Wilfrid Laurier, the other is the University of Waterloo. And I know that our local university does offer a degree in disaster management through Wilfrid Laurier. So I imagine that a lot of local universities would now start to offer those types of courses if you're looking for them. I think of it back in the day when auditing was never looked at as a course that you would take in school, but now you can't find a university without offering those types of courses. So if I were you, that would be my first choice.
Great, thanks, Paul. All right, I think we've got time for one more question unless someone sends in another one that's riveting. Let's see, we've got a question here from Jason. And that question is, how often would you recommend a company refresh or reassess its assessment of top risks?
Well, if you're in food, your HACCP is that every time there's a change in process, your sources, your equipment, you need to refresh your HACCP program. However, when it comes to crisis management and recall, if there has been organizational changes, let's say another company comes and buy you guys, or there's new leadership, definitely assess your crisis management. If there are organizational structure changes, check to make sure that you have the right people in the right functions. And also, as you do your for your traceability and doing the actual exercise of mock recall and stuff like that, do that more often. Check, and then that helps you identify if there has been changes and you need to update it. But for overall company, once a year, do a crisis management practice if possible, and that includes leadership, legal, and communication.
All right, great. I didn't see any more questions come in, but if there are any questions that maybe someone wasn't comfortable asking live on the air, please do feel free to reach out to PJAR FSI. And I'll go back now really quick to Neshat's contact information, just in case you didn't have a chance to jot that down. Do absolutely feel free to reach out with any questions. If you send them our way to PJAR FSI, we will happily get them to someone who can answer the question for you. I just want to say thank you to everybody who attended. Neshat, thank you so much for taking the time to present today. I loved the presentation. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for the audience before we wrap things up?
No, it's just that if you don't have a crisis management plan, write it today. Start putting it together today.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for the day. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. We hope to see you on a future webinar. Again, the recording and the slides will be available within about 24 to 48 hours after the broadcast has ended. And we hope to see you on the next webinar. So stay safe and stay healthy out there, everyone. Have a great day.